Welcome back to In Focus. So America continues to see elevated crime rates. Our test run with the defund police movement has gone just as expected. To make matters worse, many of the nation's delinquents with mile-long rap sheets always end up back on the streets, either due to cheap cash bail or no bail at all. Such is the case with this man, Frank Abrakwa. In this video, you can see Abrakwa allegedly smearing feces on a woman's face in the New York subway. Now, he was arrested, but promptly released without bail. And this is far from his first run-in with the law. Reports say Abrakwa has been arrested 44 times, including in September when he threatened to murder a Jewish man. He was also released without bail for that death threat. And this is just another example of the craziness going on in cities across the country. Join me now to discuss further is Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones. Sheriff, thank you so much for joining me. Sheriff, the reason I play this video, it's just totally appalling and shocking. And when I learned that this suspect was released and he's back out on the streets, I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah, it's disgusting, not just for the type of crime, obviously, but because of the deplorable state of our criminal justice system. And we've gone to a point of treating criminals like victims and victims like criminals. It's completely upside down. And while we're starting to see, I think, the pendulum swing a little bit, it is not swinging fast enough or far enough to restore the law and order that we have enjoyed as a trend over the last several decades.
And I'm looking at this crime here, and according to reports, it says the charges against him were not bail eligible under the state's bail reform laws. What he did was, I can't even imagine what this woman went through, but in the description of the reports that were reporting on it, were saying that he actually got feces in her eyeballs, like all over her face.
Yeah, it's terrible. And I'd consider this a violent crime, obviously, but this is just one example. This is happening not just in New York. This is happening all over the country. And larger the city, the larger the problems they have, the larger the violent crime spike. The problem is people have a very short memory. I came on the sheriff's department in the 1980s. And people don't remember how bad violent crime was in the late 80s and early 90s, which gave rise to things like 3 strikes, gang and gun enhancements that worked, that actually trended back the violent crime over the next couple of decades. And now we are going completely off the rails, not only eviscerating, getting rid of all of those programs that help reduce violent crimes, but added to it the actual drive to get people out of jail and keep them out of jail with these ridiculous zero bail policies.
There's definitely a mental health aspect to this. Obviously, something going on with the suspect. And according to reports, too, he was like joking around with officers. This is according to New York Post. He was saying it was like a shitty situation and that shit happens. That's just not normal. And I think part of this discussion is being lost is the mental health aspect.
I agree with you. There is a mental health aspect. There's also addiction, and sometimes they co-occur. Addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addiction. But it doesn't make the victims any less victims for the crimes. And so while we need to have a discussion about mental health and, the peace officers, the mental health treatment persons of last resort, we get called to everything. So there needs to be a mechanism to have a discussion about mental health. But unless and until that happens, they're still creating victims. We still need to protect victims, and we need to protect the rest of society from folks with these mental illnesses that manifest itself into criminal behavior and sometimes violent behavior.
And I think it was just like a couple months ago, right as the Mayor Eric Adams took over, he said the subway's safe. But I keep seeing stories like this, violent stories, popping up almost every single week.
Well, safe is a relative term, and it may be getting safer. But, honestly, like I said, I've been sheriff in Sacramento County. It's a very large county with $500 million budget for 12 years now. And I see this across the country. The same thing that I've been dealing with in Sacramento, and we've been dealing with a larger part in California, we're seeing across the country, which is why I'm running for Congress now. I just can't stand to see the public safety state of this country deteriorate to where it's been.
Becoming so dangerous, and as you pointed out, it's not just in New York City, it's happening in cities across the country, and there's so many reasons why. The cash bail, the bad bail reform laws, the Democrats' hate and vitriol and horrific rhetoric about law enforcement, and then the defund movement. And so if you watch the State of the Union address, there was a line in there where President Biden said we need to fund police. All of a sudden, Democrats stand up and they're applauding and they're so excited about it. Do they want us to forget that they're the ones who've been part of this defund the police movement for the past few years? They're the leaders of it.
I just think they've been conditioned to whatever they say, the media will carry and people will forget. But the reality is, I'm glad he said that. I hope it's true. I'd rather see action than words. Clearly, this is the result of polling that shows that these ideas never were popular, but certainly aren't popular with the large majority of folks. So, no, we need to get back to a place where our first responders are respected, where police are respected, where they're protected by laws. And again, we start treating victims like victims and protecting them from these violent criminals. It's not just that people aren't as safe, and clearly they aren't all across the country, but I think more importantly, they don't feel safe. And so that feeling of safety or lack of safety becomes their reality. And so we have to do everything we can to restore faith in law enforcement, restore the resources, funding, and equipment resources that law enforcement needs so we can get back to, make America safe again.
I wanted to play a clip of Kamala Harris. It's a flashback of what she was saying about police departments and then the evolution, if you will. So let's take a look. Roll tape.
It is outdated. It is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street. What we have to do, and what we will do, is reimagine public safety.
We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them.
Again, I like that they're finally saying fund the police, but I want to make sure that this isn't just some sort of campaign tactic, and then after the midterms, then they're going to revert back to we need to defund police because law enforcement's racist.
Yeah, well, I'm skeptical. And like I said, I'm glad he said it. I'm hoping that he can be a leader among his party. There's still some people in his own party that condemned the funding the police comments. But it's more than that. It's not repurposing the money. It's not reimagining law enforcement. It's supporting and funding law enforcement fully so that they can keep everybody safe, so they can go on about their lives. That's what it's all about, and that's what I want to see. I don't want to hear it because we've seen, your ears can't deceive what your eyes have seen, and we've seen enough over the last 2 years to know that the actions speak louder than words. So I like hearing the words, but I want to see action.
Yeah, and when we hear the Democrats talk about reimagining policing, their ideas don't make sense. And when you get a bag of feces thrown on your face at the New York subway, you're not like thinking, hey, let me call a social worker. Maybe they can come help. So it's just so ridiculous. It's so out of touch. Well, Sheriff, we appreciate you joining us on the show. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that very much. And if people want to learn more about me, they can go to scottjonesforcongress.com. Thank you.
Thanks.